If you play a lot of tabletop games like I do, then you are probably aware that many games have cards, and you've probably noticed that some people have a number of their gaming cards in plastic sleeves, like this. Why do they do this? Well, it's the obvious answer. It's because cards can become damaged by accident or wear. Why is this important? First, if a card becomes sufficiently damaged, whether it gets crushed, torn, goes into the wash, or gets chewed on by a pet, you might not be able to play with it anymore. Now, card sleeves aren't going to help with all of those cases. They best provide protection against tearing. They do at least provide that modicum of protection, which could be the difference between an unplayable card and one that you can still use. For some games, like Klondike here, not being able to play with a card can break it. As you can see here, missing the 3 of clubs, which I've removed from the deck, means that you can never complete this game. But even if a game can be played with a card missing, most games have been carefully balanced for a certain set of cards, and missing even a single card could throw off that balance. Even if cards aren't unplayably damaged, damage or wear can mark cards. And in many games, having cards that you have in your hand or on top of your deck be identifiable over time results in an unfair distribution of knowledge.
I'm out.
Me too.
What? Why? Because we all know you have the Queen of Spades in your hand. We've been playing with the same cards for 10 years, and your Queen of Spades has a huge crease in it! Get new cards!
He's my ride.
Games are frequently played around food, and as long as you're doing so, the odds of spilling a dip or a beverage, or possibly irreparably smudging a card with chocolate, is pretty high over time. And even if you don't play games around food, there's always a chance that someone you loan your game to will. But even if you perfectly protect your cards from food, beverage, and the elements, the act of shuffling your cards will eventually wear them as well. And theoretically, this should be fairly even, but as you can see from my old deck of cards, this isn't necessarily going to be the case. For some games like Dominion, some cards are always or almost always used, while other cards are sometimes used. And in Dominion, you'll almost always end up using victory point cards and money cards, but not all the action cards will see use every time you play the game. Because of this, these two types of cards will much more frequently be shuffled against each other, and that will fade them out from the front and the back of the card. Eventually, this means that players will be able to tell whether or not another player has a victory point or money card or an action card in their hand. Because some will be faded and some will be less faded. Those players can then take advantage of that knowledge of what other players might have in their hand to use that information in the game in a way that the games weren't quite designed to be played. And then there's the case of material print changes, out of print, and rare games. In several cases, the game that you have might have potentially irreplaceable cards. Many games, especially low print run designer games, often go out of print, and that means at some point there will possibly be no replacement for a damaged or overly worn card. But even if you own a game that's widely popular, there are sometimes considerable differences between the editions of the game, like between the editions of Settlers of Catan. While many such games are popular enough that you might still be able to find cards from older editions, if you do damage or wear a card beyond use, you might either have to buy a used copy of your edition or replace your copy altogether with a new one, and those are both potentially costly prospects. The most prevalent case of card sleeve usage is with collectible card games like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! These are games where some cards carry significant value, like my almost $200 Flooded Strand. And these cards lose value the more wear they have, even slight wear, and so it's common practice to sleeve such cards. Another benefit of sleeves, in particular sleeves with opaque backs, is that opaque back sleeves actually let you continue using worn or damaged but still legible cards, as they equalize the card backs of all your cards. Once I sleeve up the damaged cards, as you can see, you can no longer tell which of the ones are damaged or worn and which ones are not, at least from the back. And that extends the longevity of even already damaged or marked cards. Using card sleeves also enables some degree of organization for games where you have multiple decks. Using different colors of opaque back sleeves, you can easily make it apparent which cards belong in which deck with just a glance. Deck 1, Deck 2. When a card is out of place, you can instantly tell and return it to the deck in which it belongs. Finally, using card sleeves opens up a new option for shuffling, the mass shuffle. This form of shuffling, once you get used to it, is actually one of the more expedient forms of shuffling. It also further reduces wear on your cards because you no longer have to bend your cards like you would in a typical riffle shuffle. Of course, there are some downsides to sleeving that you should also consider, and the biggest one of all is the most obvious: expense. Sleeves cost additional money on top of the money that you already spent buying the game. While the cheapest sleeves cost less than a penny per sleeve, you aren't really getting a quality product until you're willing to pay a little more, and the price can reach up to 12 cents per sleeve in the case of these Dragon Shields. And that's not even including tax or shipping. Now, this is somewhat mitigated by the fact that sleeves are uniform. This means that if you buy a sleeve and it becomes damaged, you can just replace it with another sleeve because they're identical and you probably already have a few spares. But if a card you own becomes damaged or worn beyond use, you typically will have to purchase a whole new box of the game in order to replace it, which is certainly more costly as individual replacement cards are rarely sold. Sometimes for cheaper games, simply replacing the game altogether could be as good because it grants you potential replacements for all your cards. However, if you happen to damage the same unique card twice, then you'll have to buy a third set. Another problem with sleeves, particularly for the impatient, is that it can take a considerable amount of time to sleeve cards. This is especially enormous for games that consists of hundreds of cards that all need to be sleeved, like Dominion or Marvel Legendary, and those that buy games and want to play them right away might get annoyed at the prospect of spending a few minutes or potentially hours putting all the cards in their new game into sleeves. Sleeves can also be troublesome for storage purposes, as once you sleeve cards, they sometimes won't fit into board game inserts anymore, as the sleeves add to each card's dimensions quite a bit. As you can see here with King of Tokyo, it doesn't quite fit into the slot anymore. This sometimes means finding another place to store the cards or abandoning the original insert, after which you either need to deal with like loose components or buy or build some other organizer for your game, which ends up being an additional expense. And then there's how you buy the sleeves. Most major retailers don't really carry sleeves that you can shuffle like you'd want to in a game, which means that you'll either have to find a local game store, which might be distant or non-existent for some of you, or you'll have to purchase your sleeves online from an online retailer, and that will add the cost of shipping. And not only shipping, but you'll have to wait for the sleeves to get to you. Finally, even if you're set on buying sleeves, you then have to think about which sleeves you want to buy. Do you want clear or opaque sleeves? Do they even have sleeves for the size of the cards that you want to sleeve? Are the sleeve options at your local game store the quality you want or the price you want to pay? Do they shuffle to your liking? These are just some of the questions you might have about your sleeve options, and many simply just have to try after you buy. This itself can be expensive. But if you're interested in sleeving your cards, I am planning to make a series of follow-up videos to this one. The first one will talk about the different qualities of sleeves that you'll want to think about before purchasing sleeves for your tabletop game. Then I will begin producing videos evaluating various card sleeves, some of which you can see here, and will keep track of my evaluations on a spreadsheet on my blog at Init games. So keep an eye out for the follow-up video, which should come out in about a week or two, and then what I hope will be weekly evaluations of different available card sleeves. I hope this video has been helpful. If so, please hit the like button, and you can subscribe if you'd like to catch the follow-up videos as they get completed. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.